Harley Quinn was back again this week on the HBO Max app with a brand new episode entitled It's a Swamp Thing. I'm Cape Joel, and this is the video series where I give my thoughts and feelings on the episode that was, while also shouting out any comic book Easter eggs or references I can find. So with that out of the way, let's get to it, shall we? So then, picking up from where last week left off, Ivy and Harley are still hard at work trying to find the kidnapped Frank the Plant. Poison Ivy thinks she can track him down by tapping into the green, an elemental cosmic force from the comics that connects and animates all plant life in the universe. It's a very cool concept from the comics and one that I did not expect to be so faithfully adapted here in what is essentially a comedy show, but then again, it's one of the main reasons why I like Harley as a series, because they do cool stuff like this all the time. The recurring big problem is that Ivy's chaotic home life is making tapping into the green very hard, a problem that only gets worse with the arrival of Nora Freeze, the wife of the now deceased Mr. Freeze. Nora in the comics was kind of a non-entity even after she took up the Freeze mantle for herself just a couple of years ago. In the Harley show, though, they play her as a woman desperately trying to recapture all the years of life she missed while frozen by her husband Victor. She's basically more of a hot mess than Harley was when the show began, and having her bounce off Harley and Ivy, who have more or less gotten their acts together, is a fun new dynamic for the show to explore. It certainly helps that Nora Freeze is once again voiced by the always wonderful Saturday Night Live legend Rachel Dratch, who is just a treat every time we get to hear her. Now, if Ivy can't tap into the green herself, maybe she can find someone who can. Her old friend Alec Holland, aka the famous Swamp Thing. Tracking him down proves to be a challenge, though. Luckily, Harley and Ivy are assisted by a surprise appearance by, get this, John freaking Constantine, one of DC's most famous magic users, and oh shit, Matt Ryan is back doing the voice? How cool. You know, Mr. Ryan, if any of this ever makes it back to you, I just want you to know that you are the real DC MVP. From the short-lived Constantine series to Legends of Tomorrow to all of the many animated appearances, the dude really is just the definitive Constantine. It's also super fitting to have Constantine be the key to finding Swamp Thing, as John debuted in the pages of a Swamp Thing story for Vertigo originally, before eventually he and Swamp Thing getting patched over into the main superhero side of the DC universe, where they've lived for the last few years. This episode also features a hard-working B-plot wherein Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle hit some bumps in their own romance. We knew they were together from other episodes, but it seems like things aren't going that great. Catwoman wants her independence, and Bruce, as you might have guessed, doesn't want to be alone anymore. Aww. This leads to a truly hilarious attempt by Batman to win Catwoman over again by giving her two very expensive cats named after his dead parents. Ugh. Ultimately, it's Alfred who has to step on in to try and get these two to seek couples counseling, led in this case by none other than a brand new version of the Music Meister, voiced by Abbott Elementary's own Larry Owens. Music Meister, if you know it or not, actually has a very interesting history. He didn't appear in the comics. Instead, he made his debut in the Brave and the Bold cartoon, the very same cartoon that this show's Batman takes his voice from. In fact, just this year, Meister actually made his very first appearance in the comics in the pages of DC Pride, which actually makes a lot of sense because he was voiced by Neil Patrick Harris in that cartoon and Larry Owens now. That means two gay men have played the Music Meister in both of his animated appearances. Selina and Bruce ultimately end up reconciling when they're forced to not only talk out their problems, but sing out their problems. Yeah, Harley Season 3 has definitely been taking more swings into the realm of musical comedy, and well, I personally just love to see it. Now, the plan was originally for Nora to free Swamp Thing and force him into helping them find Frank. After all, Alec Holland is supposed to be a hero, so he wasn't just going to help our ladies, especially after him and Ivy had a falling out, what with the whole Ivy being a supervillain who wanted to kill human life and save plant life thing. But hey, here's a twist for you. Nora ends up betting Swamp Thing instead. Jeez, what can I say? The man loves cold and pale ladies. He most definitely has a type. I'm sure Abby Arcane would approve. The show hilariously chooses to play Swamp Thing like a hippy-dippy doofus complete with a man bun and talk about his swamp home getting gentrified, though believe it or not, this may actually not be the funniest Swamp Thing design ever. I'm personally quite partial to that time they just straight up made him look like Alan Moore, but with more more vines. We also learned that Swamp Thing is a divorcee too. At first I thought his ex-wife's name Linda was just a funny fake name made up for the show, but then I remembered, oh no wait, Linda Holland was totally a major character from the old Vertigo stories. Again, I'm amazed at the deep cuts this show gives us, while also making plenty of jokes along the way. Harley and Ivy's big plans end up going totally tits up when Swampy finds out that Nora isn't really into him at all beyond a one-night stand, which is bad because as an elemental being, the swamp ecosystem changes to match Alec's mood, which in this case turns the whole place into a giant death trap for everyone. This leads to Ivy needing to step up and have things out with her former friend. Apparently they were actually much closer, but Ivy dumped a lot on him while also not being all that supportive of Alec after the divorce, and seemingly that was the major cause of the rift between them, not the whole poison Ivy wanted to kill people thing, which is just funny. It's also very interesting to get to hear about Ivy as a friend pre-Harley. Lake Bell really sells these more emotional scenes here wherein she says that she doesn't want to lose Frank. In the end, it turns out Ivy never actually needed Swamp Thing, as the power of the green was in her all along, a resolution that Ivy herself deeply hates for being so cliche, which is probably the funniest joke in the whole episode if you ask me. Also, maybe Harley knew this trip was exactly what Ivy needed to get out of her mind blockage, because hey, Harley is a psychiatrist, even if she never seems to be able to use her disciplines when it comes to herself and her own issues, but she can still help other people from time to time. But wait, this all still begs the question, who exactly kidnapped Frank the Plant? Well, as it turns out, it was Bruce Wayne. Oh yeah, I forget, in a show where the supervillains are the protagonists, a superhero like Batman would probably be trying to stop them in their plans, which in its own way kind of makes this a super solid and super unexpected twist. I know I was surprised. And so that was It's a Swamp Thing, and overall I thought this episode felt very much like a first season episode, which isn't a bad thing at all. It's just that it was a lot more comedy forward, with Nora acting like a major foil to everyone else around her. The Eden Serum plotline took a back seat for a bit, which is fine. It doesn't always need to revolve around that. That's also not to say there wasn't some moments of characterization going on. This really is the Ivy-centric season, and in past episodes we've learned a lot about Pamela as a partner, a lover, a scientist. This episode was all about learning how Poison Ivy approaches friendship, and how in the past she hasn't always been a good friend, but how she's desperately trying to fix that part of herself. Again, too, as they have all season, they really highlight the fact that Poison Ivy really holds herself to these very, very high standards and ends up getting disappointed when she can't reach them. Overall, I thought this one was pretty good. Not my favorite of the season, maybe not the best of the season, but still totally worth your time and definitely filled with lots of good laughs.